Good evening, everybody that's watching. Thank you so much for attending. And if you're watching this at a later date, thank you for watching tonight's webinar. So, we're obviously the founding members of the Association of Bereavement Counsellors, and tonight I am hosting a webinar about what not to say to grieving pet owners. Just a quick sort of disclaimer that what we're about to discuss and go through may not apply to you or may not apply to people in your inner circle or close to you, or there may not be things that you've personally come across or had experience with, but we wanted to discuss these particular platitudes, I suppose, or things that people say because we have had experience of the aftermath, I suppose, of people hearing these things. And so we want to talk about what not to say to pet owners, but also why they may not be the best approach or the most appropriate things to say. And so each member is going to discuss, their point of view about each title. And I really hope that you enjoyed tonight's webinar. And obviously, any questions, either ask throughout, we'll try and get to them as much as we can, or we'll do it like, maybe Q&A at the end if we have time. So I'll just quickly introduce myself and I'll go around the other members. So I'm Carrie. I am a pet bereavement counsellor and hypnotherapist. I qualified as a pet bereavement counsellor in 2001. I qualified as a hypnotherapist this past November. And I'm also a tutor for Innovet CPD training. And obviously, I'm very passionate about pet bereavement and passionate about supporting pet owners pre, post loss. And yeah, proud to be here, proud to be hosting tonight's webinar. And so I think that's enough about me. I'll move around, let the other members introduce themselves, and you can get to know us a little bit better. Dawn, I think I'm going to go to you next.
Hi everyone, my name's Dawn Murray from Living with Pet Bereavement. I run the advanced diploma there, the senior tutor at Living with Pet Bereavement. And as with Carrie, I have been 20 years plus supporting pet carers pre, during and post the loss of their companion animals. And delighted to have founded this wonderful association. Thank you.
It wouldn't be everyone. Dawn's honestly, like Dawn said, she's been like doing this for many years, and when I first started, it was pet bereavement counselling wasn't really that big of a thing. It wasn't really that well known, and then I came across like Dawn's work, and I was like, something else out there is like me, does what I'm doing, and then we've got Kirsty, we've got Dean, we've got Lucy, and it's just. And all of our members accredited, registered. There are so many of us out there, and I love this association, just bringing everyone together and highlighting the importance of what we do, but also, as we'll be talking about in the webinar, like the complexities of this topic. So, yeah, sorry, I'll shut up there. Sorry, Niall, would you like to introduce you?
Me? My turn. Okay. I've been working in pet bereavement for just over 2 years. I did Dawn's advanced diploma, and I have my own website and clients offering pet bereavement support. And I'm also very honoured that Dawn put her faith in me, and I take some of the calls that live in pet with pet people living with pet bereavement as well. So yeah, I've got a mixed portfolio, shall we say, and I was a Samaritan for many years. And so when I stopped doing that and things moved on and, life evolved, and this actually, I've always loved animals, seeing the next natural thing to do. So here I am.
Yeah. Brilliant. Kirsty, would you like to introduce?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Kirsty. I'm currently working in veterinary and have been for the last 11 years. Currently have a cat that's knocking stuff over, sorry. Really awkward timing. Yeah, so I've been in veterinary for 11 years and supported a lot of our clients through pet loss, obviously. We're getting to that age in our practice now. Our practice is 15, so we're starting to see some of our clients that came in with puppies are now going through that stage where they are getting terminal diagnoses and having to do preemptive euthanasia care. So that's pretty much where my passion lies, if you can call it that. I really find it quite rewarding to help and guide those clients through those end stages, and obviously be there through and post as well. So yeah, I did the advanced diploma with living with pet bereavement, I think about nearly 18 months ago. And yeah, was very honoured when Dawn asked me to come on and be one of the founders for the association. So yeah, loving it here and looking to really build and move through.
So tonight's webinar is all about what not to say to somebody. And again, like I said earlier, there are some of these things I've said before I knew better, and I cringed now thinking about what I've said to people, like, oh well, you know, at least it was quick, or oh, they lived a good long life. And honestly, I could just, if I could go back in time, I'd kick myself. But I didn't know any better, and I do now, and that's the important thing. We know better, we do better. And so, you know, you may hear, listening to what we're going to talk about, you may think, well, I've said that. What's the issue with that? Or you may think, oh, I didn't think that would be such a problem. And so that's what tonight's all about, really, is to either introduce you to phrases that you may be about to say or have said, and just helping people to understand why these things aren't as supportive as you think. But what's important to bear in mind is that it's the person saying this, whatever slide we're on, whatever phrase or platitude it is, or sentiment it is, what's important is who's saying it, the reason for saying it. Are they intending to hurt or heal? And the intent behind it. Do they mean well, or are they just trying to, are they feeling uncomfortable and trying to make the situation more palatable for them, but not actually helping the other person, if you see what I mean? So that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sharing the webinar now, the slides, and as we go through each one, I'm going to put it to each of the members what they think about that particular slide, their viewpoints, and we'll have a bit of discussion about each one. And again, if you've got any questions, please put it in the chat and we'll try and get to them as we go. I know how you feel, or I know how you feel. Okay, so we'll just put that to everybody. Let's see. Oh, sugar, bear with me. So, who would like to tackle this one? Let's see. I'm just trying to choose somebody that would like. I think
I'll kick it off, Carrie, if you want.
Yeah, you go with this one. Yeah.
And I think I would just like to reiterate, every single one of us without exception have all said some of the following that you're about to hear tonight. I know how you feel, etc., etc. Because sometimes we just act impulsively. It's the microphone nearly gone there, and we say things without actually thinking through the impact that it may have on the other person. Instead of saying, I know how you feel, because obviously the first sort of reaction that a lot of pet owners think is, no, actually, you don't know how I feel. You can't possibly imagine how I am feeling right now. And that's what they would like to say back. Some do, but that's the response they would like to give. And I think sometimes, you know, it would do as well. Obviously, you know, we're all experienced in this now, but as opposed to saying to somebody, oh, I know how you feel, is to reassure them, to say, I've lived through that experience. It's perhaps better to say, I cannot begin to imagine how you feel. I have also lived through that experience, and I know how badly it affected me. I know how heartbroken I was. Now, that's not to, you know, move it back to the person, you know, it's about them. This is about reassuring somebody about their loss. And I think sometimes if we reply by saying, I know how you feel, it can be quite upsetting for the person to hear that when they're thinking that nobody actually knows how they feel, because of course that stems from where a lot of their problems actually come from, is because they believe that nobody actually understands how they feel. But as you said, Carrie, it really depends a lot on who's saying it. So you know, if you're very much, if you're close to the person and you're very much aware of the circumstances surrounding their loss, and there may be a lot of similarities in the loss, to say, yes, I know how you feel, because when that happened to me, I felt like that as well. But I think to say I know how you feel can, a lot of pet owners can feel quite offended by that, and hurt. Because yet again they're thinking that is somebody else who just doesn't understand, to say they know how I feel when they really have no idea how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I say, it's almost like discounting. Yeah, I've said to people that, you know, when you say I know how you feel, well, I'll say to people, you don't know how somebody feels because you're not them, you're not that person. And it's like you say, it comes from a good place. Sometimes it's like, you know, like you say, if you've been in a similar situation, and that's sort of self-disclosure that actually I've been through similar, so yeah, I get it. But like I say, others, you know, it's yeah, it almost can feel like your pet wasn't special, that everybody feels the way you do, and you know, your grief is nothing you know, special, or you know, it was just one of those things, and it's, you know, and as you said, it's the intent and, you know, behind these things as well. So
Well, quite often, Carrie, when somebody says, I know how you feel, they immediately go on to say, I know how you feel because you know, my dog or my cat or whatever also died 10 years ago. But it may be in completely different circumstances.
yeah,
You know, so some passings are very, very peaceful, and some passings are sadly very traumatic. And it's that, making that assumption, that we need to stop making assumptions that you know how somebody else feels, because clearly we don't know how that other person feels. Although, to be honest, it is a perfectly natural reaction to try and reassure somebody. And as you said, you know, depending who you're speaking to, is it a you know, is it a partner, is a family member, a friend, you know, work colleague, acquaintance, somebody like that, because obviously depending on who you're speaking to is going to determine how they perceive what you are actually saying to them.
yeah, that's it. It's the assumptions, and like, you know, like I say, the person saying it may feel that they're opening up and they're sharing their own pain, and maybe thinking that, you know, oh, this is somebody I can open up to about what I'm going through too, and the other person just hasn't got the capacity to, you know, the capacity to hear it or to sit with someone else in their pain. They just want someone to acknowledge their pain, and not. And I think oftentimes it feels awkward when somebody's upset, and you know, you want to reassure them, you want to find the positive somewhere, or you know, you want to show that person that they're not alone, and that's natural, it's understandable, but it's just bearing in mind that what can seem well intentioned and coming from a good place isn't necessarily going to be received that way. And grief, you know, can make us feel and think, you know, change our thinking, and what we would normally brush off and, you know, think, I know they meant well, I'll let it slide, may actually be something that someone thinks, actually, do you know what? No. You know, and then a well-intentioned comment inflames the situation, and it's, you know, it's hard for all parties, because all we want is to help somebody else. I think we're doing the right thing, but like Dawn said, don't assume that your situation is, I suppose in a way it's almost like a comparison of, you know, like, oh well, you know, I went through this too. And for the person that's grieving, they may see something that says, oh yeah, I know you feel, I went through it. And then that person that's grieving could be like, well, they're obviously doing so much better than I am. What's wrong with me? Why am I not where they are? And there's so much to it. So yeah. Now, Kirsty, would you like to?
Well, yeah, I think the thing is the bottom line is to invite them to tell you how they feel. They, you know, you say, someone says, I know how you feel. You know, a lot of people there, they just want to tell somebody about it, and they may have been shut off by family members, friends, you know, their own partner, children, whatever. And it's like, you know, maybe you even, you know, have to kind of maybe get the thing going. Maybe say, that sounds huge. It sounds like that's engulfing, overwhelming. It sounds like you're, you know, you're completely floored by it. You know, am I right? Tell me how it is for you. I can only imagine. So you're, you know, you've got your rapport starting to go, and you're actually telling them, look, I'm here and I'm going to listen, and you know, I've already got an idea maybe, and I'm asking you, am I right? And like that, then, you know, it opens up to say, well, yes, you are, or no, it's not quite like that. Or, you know, we always assume as well that maybe someone's, you know, they're down on the negative side of feeling, but actually, point the fact they might be want to tell you something else, which is, you know, there's something in there which they could be ashamed of, or they don't know whether they should be feeling it, or they've been judged on it. So the only sure far way is to ask. And then to listen, and then let them know they've been hurt. So it's no good asking and then only playing lip service to it. You know, you got to go the full journey. And you know, that's just my thought. And you know, we have to ask, and if you like, probe gently and let them know they're in a safe space to do it, to let go.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, no, that's it, isn't it? Like I say, if they've been shut down, to hear somebody say, I know how you feel, it's almost like saying to them, you don't need to say another word, I know what you're going to say. And then that person just shuts down and they feel alone, more isolated or alone. And, you know, like you say, if you're inviting that person, and again, if you're asking them, like you say, if you're asking that person how it is for them, like you said now, just make sure you've got the time for the answer. You know, don't just be like, oh well, you know, I'm just asking just to be polite. You know, if you're going to ask, do it because you're going to give that time and attention, like you said, that is needed for that topic. Kirsty, would you like to say anything? Or
the I know how you feel very much reminds me of the cursory when you walk into work on a Monday morning. Oh, how was your weekend? You know, it's kind of a false interest, you know, and I think it sets the parameters all wrong. It's sympathy versus empathy. You want to be empathetic, not sympathetic, and I think it just sets the mood wrong. It sets everything on the wrong path. A bit like Neil said, you've got to have the time to follow up, and this is not a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Or statement, sorry.
Yeah.
But pretty much everything else I was going to say has been covered, so at least we're all on the same page.
Yeah. So it just shows, like, you know, that we're all, like I say, on the same page. We're all, you know, and I hope like whoever's like watching this right now will be thinking, oh yeah, I hope tonight is either going to be I hadn't thought of it like that, or okay, now I know not to say that, and this is why, or, you know, I really hope everyone gets something from this. Yeah. Right, next slide. We have, oh gosh, why is it not? Next one, please. Right. Some of these, even though I've created this webinar, I have to take a deep breath when I think about these things, because I'm still going on about that. Oh, now, we were talking about this like last night, having a quick discussion, and there's different ways you can take this. Okay. And again, this all comes down to the intent behind it. So it could be a work colleague who's sick and tired of hearing about Fluffy and their passing and has just had enough, and they're like, still going on about that, as if to say, look, I've reached my limit. There's only so much I can listen to you talk about your pet. I can't do it anymore. And or it could be someone that says, you know, you're still going on about that, but because they're still hurting and they can't talk, they just don't have the capacity for it anymore. They just need a break. So it depends on the person, the circumstances. But so, Niall, what's your views on still going on about that?
Well, exactly what you've said. It's who's, again, the intent, but a lot of it seems to be from talking to clients, and it's not. It's exactly the person saying who's still going on about that. Either they're trying to protect themselves from their own hurt, or a lot of it is they're scared of the big emotions of grief that are being presented to them. The other side of it can be if it's close friends, family, work colleagues, is they want normal back. They want their friend back or their relative back or whatever. They want them back, and they want them like happy. They want them over it. They want them back to normal, because their grief is disrupting, the person's grief is disrupting my life. I don't want that. I want my normal back, and I want them back to how they are. And you know, that's by no means definitive. It's no means like in every instance, but very often from talking to people, it seems to be more than anything, it's that they are they might have had enough, but they've also they can't cope with seeing that person hurt anymore. They just want to be able to. They snap out of it. You've had a couple of days. You've had 3 weeks. You've had 4 weeks, whatever. And it's kind of like get over yourself. But a lot of it, to say, it's never meant cruelly, but it's just that from their point of view, it's like I'm getting wrung out by this, and my support in a way only goes so far, and I just want to get back to normal life. And I say 9 times out of 10, or 9 times out of 10, I don't think it's ever meant cruelly. It's just life moves on, so let's move on with it. That's that kind of like feel. But it's very, very hard for the bereaved, because they're closed down. They're feeling they should be doing better. They feel they should be moving faster. There's huge amounts of judgment in it, and there's what it can do to them, and how it can kind of traumatize them and set them back. Well, that's for another story, another time.
Yeah, thank you. I like the different approaches. Like say, it's but bear in mind, like the time, the place, the context, and the intent. Who's saying it, why are they saying it, where is it being said, and take a step back and thinking, it might not be meant in a hurtful way. It might just be like Niall just said, they just don't want to see you hurting anymore, want to get back to some sort of normality. But in a way, like I say, it can cause the bereaved to shut down and mask their grief, I suppose, push it down, because if no one wants to hear, some people are verbal processors, they need to talk about something over and over and over again to get it right in their own minds. And they might be moving forwards, but they just need to verbalize it first. And to the listeners, it might be, they're talking about the dog again. And it's like, well, maybe that person needs to just to get it, not get over it. I've never said get over it, but to progress and to move forward, through their bereavement. But Kirsty, would you like to?
So this one for me is more about time frames. So I often say to my clients, there is no time frame for grief. Some people it can take weeks, some people it can take months, some people it can take years. And I think this phrase, while being meant well, comes across as almost judging the bereaved person because they're taking so long, or because they're not done with it yet, they're not over it yet, they're not finished with it yet. And I think when you impose timeframes on people and you you give them those worries and doubts, they suppress it further. So we are at then a bit like what Neil said, that you're halting the progress, and you're halting moving through that bereavement process to get to a point where you can comfortably go around, you know, live day to day and not feel that really strong emotion. And I think, yeah, imposing timeframes on people, it can be really dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Dawn, what would you like to say?
Yes, just agreeing with what everybody said. Sometimes, as I say, when clients have said to me, it's quite often a relationship, a spouse, where they've explained to me that their partner, husband, wife, whatever, you know, it's caused some angst in the relationship, and perhaps one of them have turned around and said, "Are you still going on about that? You know, you need to move on, blah, blah, blah." And sometimes it can help to understand the different styles of grieving. And it doesn't mean to say that perhaps in a close relationship, if somebody actually says that it's you know, they're trying to be malicious or shock you out of your grief or whatever. Quite often it can just be the fact that they are, I think Niall might have said it, they are hurting too. And they don't want to keep talking about the loss of the family pet, because it's hurting them too much. So I quite often hear that being said in the setting of a relationship, or when the companion animal is a family pet.
Yeah, thank you. Right, we shall move on to the next one. This is something I've been guilty of saying in the past, because I was looking for the positive. When I first started in veterinary practice, back when I was like 18, I had no idea what to say to owners. I hadn't really witnessed many euthanasias or that sort of thing. I saw my first ever euthanasia at like 17, 18. And so for me, I used to find it really awkward to be in the consulting room with a client that was visibly upset, you know, and I've seen pretty much every range of emotion that a human being can show. And as an 18-year-old, you know, slightly older, especially with older pets, you know, they like the 12, 14-year-old dogs or 15, 20-year-old cats, what have you. To me, back then, I would say, oh, you know, they lived a good, long life. And I meant it as in, you know, you've done such a good job getting them to this age. You know, this breed doesn't normally live past 12, or, you know, you've done a great job with them. And, or, you know, how great that you've managed to have all this time together. And I was trying to find the positives, when really what I should have done is just accept that, yes, they got to a good age, but we're never ready. Just because they get to an age that is deemed appropriate for loss, we feel like we should be ready for it, doesn't mean it's going to be any easier to handle. And again, I was trying to, you know, I think it was more because of my awkwardness and my inability to sit with somebody in their pain and hold space for somebody in their pain, that I was trying to find anything to uplift the moment. And really, as I said, all I needed to do was to acknowledge how difficult this is, you know, and saying to someone, "Oh, you've done a great job getting to this age." It's like, so does that mean that if they only reached 6 months, that they didn't do a good job? Or if they only got to 2, that they neglected them somehow? And obviously, that's not what was intended, but you can maybe see how it can be misinterpreted, or, you know, taken the wrong way. So that's my sort of take on it. But Kirsty, I'm going to come to you as a veterinary nurse and see what your take on this is.
Oh my goodness me, I have said this so many times in practice life, and every time I think about it, I do cringe now. It wasn't until I did Dawn's course that I realised quite how multi-layered this one could be. And I do still hear it from my colleagues in practice quite a bit. I think it just, again, it just assumes that everybody is ready, like off the back of what you were saying, everyone's ready to let them go when they're older. And really, it's never long enough. It's always going to be cut short, whether they, like you say, whether they lived till 20, 12, whatever. And the way I got around this one, when I realised possibly the damage I was doing, was to say, what age did you get Fluffy? And then they say, oh, had him 6 weeks old, or 6 months. And then I follow up with, I bet you've got a lifelong time of memories and lots of photos. And that usually triggers, especially in a professional environment, so from behind a vet's desk, people who are waiting to go in for that euthanasia appointment, it usually triggers a story. And then that client then lives that story and lives that memory with somebody while their pet is still alive and is still with them. So when they go into that room for euthanasia, they're going in with a warm memory and not I am in a vet clinic. This is a very clinical, cold setting. As much as we try not to make it like that, you aren't at home.
Yeah.
So this one for me was a real eye-opener. It was one of the things that really stuck with me when I did the course was it's not what you think it is, not the nice sentiment that you originally think it is, but it's the one everyone goes to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've learned a lot to turn this one on its head, and I'm really glad I did. But yeah, this one is tough in veterinary. I mean, I've travelled to a couple of practices, and I hear it a lot, and people just don't realise, they don't understand that it could have different connotations.
Yeah.
And for the example with us, we adopted a lot of elderly dogs, and one in particular we knew had didn't have a very good life for the first 13 years, and it was only the 3 years she spent with us. So while she died at 16 as a result of cancer, if somebody had to turn around to me and said, oh, well, she lived, what age was she? Well, she was 16. Oh, well, she lived a good long life. Well, no, actually, she didn't. She didn't have a good long life. She had a very short and happy life latterly, but for the majority of her life, it wasn't good. And of course, that could fine, okay, I'm okay with that. But for somebody else, that might then get them to start focusing on the 13 years that they didn't have that dog in their life, and what that dog actually went through, and what potentially they suffered for all those years before they were able to adopt them, as opposed to, like Carrie was saying, focusing on the good aspect of the fact that the pet has lived a wonderful, long and happy life. But as Kirsty said, focusing on the memories throughout that time, or even offering up a sort of alternative that, you hope that in the weeks and months ahead, if obviously if the dog has died by that point, in the weeks and months ahead, that they'll take comfort from the fact that their pet did have a happy life. And that's assuming, once again, back to who it is that you're speaking to and what your relationship is with that person, whether you know that that dog actually did have a very good and happy life. But to say it to somebody you're not 100% sure about, it's probably best not to go there. And it also implies that when a pet reaches a certain age, that it's okay for them to die. That it's been more acceptable for an elderly dog to die than it is for a younger dog to die, where a lot of people may have spent just a very short time with that elderly dog. They haven't maybe necessarily had that dog in their life for all those years. It may have been a very short period.
Yeah. Now, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, it's part of, if a dog's fit, or any animal's fit and healthy, and then maybe there's a sudden illness and they die, and then maybe 16, 17, something like that, is we're kind of, a lot of people I've talked to, is they know it's not rational, but they start to go into the realms of almost I'm not saying believing their animal's immortal, but it's like the years tick by and they're still healthy. There's no arthritis, maybe there's no this, there's no this, and it, you know, the yearly check is fine, and it's like, oh my word, you know, and you know, all of these things, and we are led to believe, with maybe the likes of Supervet, etc., that, you know, anything can be cured and getting older doesn't matter. But you know, we've all got to face it. We've all got a limit somewhere, and so it's kind of almost where people, and they've said, and I did it myself with my own dog, is actually, yes, I put the possibility there of, you know, we're going to die out of my head, because it just, you know, didn't compute, because everything was fine for so long. And I know that's only just like one sort of situation if an animal's been healthy, but that's the kind of thing. And as Kirsty said, you said as well, it's never enough. You always want more. 16, 18, 20. Why would that be enough? Why would that satisfy anyone? You want more. You know, you don't want to give that up. So to just, as I say, to be offering a platitude like that, well meaning, with it still is, but you know, you risk a rebound of someone saying, well, you don't get it, do you? Why would you think, you know, the fact even if you say they've lived a long life and take the good out of it, why would you think that's enough for me? Why do you think that's going to cut it? And why do you think that's going to make me feel better?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. Right, let's move on to. Are you going to get another one?
Now you see, that's I don't tend to get asked that question very much, because I usually have a transition dog or cat, but I was asked this only four years ago now. I beg your pardon, 5 years ago now, when my staffy Andy was euthanized. It was the first time in 15 years or so that we had been without a dog, and yes, I did get that asked that, and it's almost like the dog or the cat, whatever the companion animal is. I mean, even some of the small furries or birds, we can't. We're not looking to replace them. We are looking to start a new relationship. But when you're grieving a loss, you're focused on that pet that has died, and you're not necessarily even thinking about it. Although, having said that, when some people are asked if they're going to get another dog, cat, whatever, they can come across as being quite offended by it. But in actual fact, a lot of people will later confess to the fact that they had already thought about that, but they didn't want to tell anybody because they didn't want anybody to think bad of them. So this type of question can be quite complex, and quite often it is open for discussion with some pet owners who are already thinking about another pet, but they feel really, really guilty. They feel deep guilt for even thinking that that might be acceptable. So they can then say, oh, so-and-so, suggested that we might be looking for another dog. So that actually gives them a get out for them thinking it themselves, because then they're saying that it was suggested to them. But for the majority of people, they can be deeply offended, as though to even suggest that they were going to get another companion animal, especially if it's said to people in the early days and weeks of grief. Sure, when you start moving into the months, people are less offended by it, but people can find it very offensive if they're ever asked if they're getting another dog or cat or companion animal.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, John.
I completely agree with Dawn on everything she said, but it does, as for some people, actually, as Dawn said, it can open up, like, or open up, if you like, the permission to talk about the possibility of getting another one. But in a first instance of, are you going to get another one? It can sort of like, well, so you just go down the shop and get another one. You just sort of like replace you. It's totally it's almost like you're getting a new Hoover or something. It's like, you know, this is not something you've had a relationship with that you need to process, to work through, whatever. It's just like, well, you can just get another one. It, you know, take up the same space, look the same, do the same things. Like, you know, job done. From that point of view, you know, our saying like not something to say is, it can be extreme. And again, quite offensive and close people down, because it's like, well, you don't get where I'm at, do you? And in an instant, you've lost rapport, you've lost everything.
Yeah, thank you. Kirsty, do you want to add anything?
I'm going to flip this one on its head and say, for those who don't know, I keep giant house rabbits, and they do have a shorter lifespan than some other small companion animals. And the one I get quite often is, "Oh, well, you're not going to get another one, are you?" And I've had that from two close family members, and I ponder on that one a lot, and I think it's because they don't like seeing me hurt, because these small furries, they do have their issues, and they do pass away, you know, sooner than potentially, you know, a longer lived dog or cat, and the ones I do get, unfortunately, do tend to be quite poorly. So, you know, I see my job as making the rest of their life the best it possibly can, which, you know, but I do get the, "Oh, you're not going to get another one, are you?" all the time. And I say to them, "Yes, I am." And it does sometimes get under my skin, because I'm a bit like, well, it's my call, you know. I can see how, "Are you going to get another one?" would potentially indicate someone who, you know, wants to replace, or you know, just like Niall said, fill the gap. But for me, I am going to get another one, because I want to give that animal the care and the space and the love it needs. So not to be not to be difficult, but I find this one strikes the stubborn streak in me, but I don't think that's healthy. I do think that can be, you know, it does roll me up the wrong way when people say that to me, because, you know, it's my choice, it's my house, it's my lifestyle, my choice. I will get one, but when I'm ready. And I think that's another thing as well, is it doesn't give you that time frame. Going back to that, you know, the conversation we had about time frames, is, are you going to get another one? Just almost assumes that if you're not going to do it now, you're never going to do it, or you know. And I think, again, imposing that on people, it just doesn't help.
Thank you. I like that alternative viewpoint to it, and like I said, flipping it. That's a good approach. At least they aren't in pain now. And this is something I've said. You know, in the CPD that I tutor for an vet, I do a slide on what to say, what to avoid, and then what to say. And I'll say, you know, and one of the ones is "at least." And I'll say to the students, how are you going to finish that sentence in a way that is going to support that client? At least what? You know, what? And again, this is something, and I get goosebumps because I've cringed. I've said this, well, at least they aren't in pain now, like happy, and it's like, yes, they've died, but they're not hurting anymore. Positive, isn't it? And it's like, no, stop. And then, again, like, you know, I'll say to students that saying they aren't in pain now, well, what if the owner didn't realise was a possibility they could have been in pain? I've had clients that said, "What do you mean they aren't in pain now? You mean they were suffering? They were delayed did it take too long to make the decision?" And then you're like, no, not at all. And then, you know what I mean? It just blows up into something bigger than it needed to be. And but it comes from a good place. It's like, well, they're not in pain now, and it's like, well, yeah, that's true, but the client's in pain now. You know, yes, they're you know they're aware their pet isn't suffering anymore, but that doesn't make it that it doesn't make it that easy, that much easier, I suppose. Um, so now, what do you think about
Well,
this?
a bit what you're saying there, because it's sort of like, well, yeah, are you saying I neglected my animal? Are you saying I didn't get enough care? Are you saying that not only me but my vet let the animal suffer? Have I hung on too long? Did I make the wrong decisions? You know, it completely can bring into kind of thoughts that you weren't a good pet carer, pet owner, whatever you want to call it, that you didn't do your best for them, and that actually, and then it brings up the fact that we'll all get the biggest stick we can to beat ourselves. Is, was I selfish? Did I put my needs before theirs? All of those things. But at the end of the day, it's just another one of those things. Is, well, again, somebody might have said, well, if they were in a little bit of pain, they seem to manage it quite well, but at least I had longer with them. Or all of these kind of, again, it's all of these things bring up different things in different people, but it's almost like just one of those things somebody says because they're just desperate to say something, of kind of like fill a hole. And in a way, it does show sort of that someone's perhaps trying to understand, and they're trying to, find the positive in whatever. But like you say, if the animal hadn't been in pain, or it brings up doubt, and pet owners, well, carers, they're very, very vulnerable when they're in grief. So all of these things that if you weren't in grief, you probably wouldn't even think twice about them. But when you are, we blow them up into these huge things. You say it becomes a lot more than it needs to be.
Yeah, definitely. Dawn?
Yeah, I think I think as well it's important to say that in the circumstances that you might want to say that to somebody, if you're talking to a friend, this isn't necessarily from the point of view of pet bereavement counselling support. But if you were talking to a friend, for example, you might want to, to say that something along the lines of saying, well, tell her, Fluffy or, Rover to die, in peace. And well, that's assuming that that they were euthanized. There's always making these. We should never make assumptions, but if we know the circumstances in which the pet died, it's allowing our pets to die with dignity is the most selfless act that we can do. It's from a place of love, as opposed to saying, well, they're not in pain now, because yes, the torment, or people didn't realize, because a lot of people confuse pain and suffering, not knowing that they aren't always the same thing. Pain can cause suffering, but a pet can also suffer without being in pain. So if we are to remind them that they are in pain, then yes, the pet owner is going to start questioning every single thing that they believe or perceive that they did wrong. And the thing about in pet bereavement is it's not just at the time of the death of their pet. They start going over months and years prior to the death. Yeah. If I did that wrong, and if I'd done something different, then this wouldn't have happened, and if I had done that, something else wouldn't have happened, right up until. So to offer words of comfort, to say, well, at least they're not in pain now, yes, can lead to enormous guilt and reaction on behalf of the pet carer.
Yeah. Kirsty, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, I think Niall and Dawn and yourself have covered it completely. There's nothing that I would add here other than, like, you are just like seeding that guilt, which is what Dawn was just saying. And yeah, there's this one, and again, I hear this one a lot, and I think it is well meant, and it's generally people who don't know the person that well, that intimately, or they're not in their family or friend circle, and they just want to offer something. They just feel emotionally uncomfortable that this person in front of them is suffering and is in pain, emotional pain, sorry. And I think this is one of those ones that just gets pulled out of the memory bank because no one else knows what to say.
Yep, that's it. Like I said, when I first started, before I knew any better, this was the sort of thing I would say because it felt right at the time, and it felt like, I wanted to say something, try and show support for that person, and but it can come out, in ways we don't intend it to. So,
but I think for veterinary staff as well, though, Carrie, it is almost becomes an acceptable thing for veterinary staff to say, or a vet to say, there we are, they're at peace now, they're not in any pain, they're not in any pain, which can be misheard as at least they aren't in pain now, but it can be very much sometimes if it's said by veterinary staff, vets, but in actual fact that can actually be very reassuring and very comforting. I think it's when it's then said afterwards, people are with coping with that sort of emotional numbness, and maybe 24 hours later they maybe meet a neighbour, a colleague, somebody they used to maybe be out walking their dog with or whatever, and they say, oh goodness, what happened, and they then go on to say, well, at least they aren't in any pain now. That's when it takes a slightly different connotation to the person who is grieving the loss. So I think it can change, and it can change depending on when it's said and who it is said by. Because I would certainly, if my vet had said to me that that's your I don't know, Andy's now, Andy has passed and he's no longer in any pain, I would personally, and obviously everybody's everybody handles their grief differently, but for me, I would find that quite reassuring, even although physically Andy was never in any pain anyway. But if the vet said that to me, I would find it a very reassuring comment.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next one we have, I'd have done X, Y, Z. So
I'm quite happy to kick off with this one because this is
go on, Dawn.
I saw quite recently with social media support groups. You can see people, because obviously they're behind a screen, they don't really understand what's happened. Perhaps I would have done X, Y, and Z. I would have gone with X-rays, etc. Now, for myself, we've had many sight hounds over the years, greyhounds, with a deerhound cross, lurchers, etc. Now, osteosarcoma is one of the biggest killers in sight hounds, and when our small greyhound Ruby was first diagnosed with osteosarcoma, we opted to have amputation and chemotherapy. She was only 8 years old. She was a small greyhound. She was fit and healthy, and everything went smoothly. However, a few years later, we were faced with it with some of our larger greyhounds who were slightly older, and they wouldn't have coped so well with amputation and chemotherapy. So, funnily enough, when I discussed it with a friend, they said, "Oh, I would have gone ahead with amputation, and I would have gone ahead with the chemotherapy." But so that almost, like guilt tripping me, because I chose not to do that. But of course, I had chosen not to do that because of the dog's age, the dog's character. It was a large breed dog. Quite often it makes a bit of a difference whether it's the front leg or the hind leg, so on and so forth. But to say, oh, I would have gone ahead, why didn't you go ahead and do, because that's what I would have done. Yeah, it can really guilt trip you. And the thing is, you can actually, if you dwell on these things, many months and sometimes years later, you can still think about that. It really hurts, and it can really damage friendships, relationships, because then you start questioning, did I not do enough? I think, as Niall said on with the previous comment. But this nowadays can be quite, people want to give their opinions. I would have done X, Y, and Z, but until you're actually walking in somebody's shoes, or the animal, as well, nobody ever knows the animal as well as the person that looks after them, the primary carer. So but everybody's got an opinion nowadays, and everybody wants to voice that opinion on what they would have done because that's what they did and it worked for them. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say it's going to work for somebody else.
Yep, definitely. Kirsty, do you want to add anything to
that? Yeah, so we often come across, and it's not a very nice thing to think about or say, but euthanasia is a treatment option. And, building on what Dawn said, sometimes, it's the recovery more than the treatment. So, yes, you can take a limb off to remove the osteosarc, but the recovery, it's not only can be a lot on the animal, but it can be an awful lot on the owner as well. Some people just, for want of everyone in the world, do not have the time or the space or the finances to then follow up that recovery care. I've seen patients that have had severe injuries that need bandage changes every 3 days. Now, it's all very well if you work in the industry, but if you've got a 9-to-5 job, you've got kids, you've got other commitments, trying to get that patient in and out of the surgery every 3 days for bandage changes sometimes is just not viable. So for someone to say, oh, I'd have done that, well, your circumstances are different. So potentially, yes, you might have done. But actually, sometimes, not often, but sometimes euthanasia is a treatment option. And I think that's what we have to remember when we hear this phrase, because actually it might not have been, like Dawn said, the set of circumstances that allowed you to have done what somebody else would have done.
Yeah, exactly. I like when you said euthanasia is a treatment option, because something else that I'll say to people is that there are worse fates than death. I'm part of the work that I try and do is try and remove the sort of stigma and the taboo around euthanasia and take the fear out of it and the darkness out of it. When people hear euthanasia, they think it's this great big dark, nasty, horrible thing that we just don't talk about, or we talk about in hushed tones. But really, euthanasia literally means good death or easy death, and it's like what more could we want for our companions when they're struggling, or like say, that can cause guilt for people that, they could have. I mean, we'll see clients who say like, I was offered this treatment, but I didn't go for it. Maybe that would have been the treatment that saved them. But also, then I'd say to people, yeah, but if you could prolong your pet's life, but who benefits from that? You benefiting from it because you get longer with them, or is your companion benefiting from it? It's the quality of the life they have over the quantity, and the quality of life outweighs quantity every time.
Most definitely.
Yeah, you can prolong it, and like you're saying about dressing changes. I mean, I spoke to a client who was tempted to go down the chemotherapy route, and I said, well, yeah, that's an option. Just bear in mind that you've got, when they come home, you've got to, it's a carcinogen, it's such a powerful drugs that you're using. It's carcinogenic, that's the thing. So, they were pregnant at the time, so you wouldn't be able to touch the, you wouldn't you'd have to be so careful touching them, handling feces, urine, bodily fluids. There's so much goes into it. They'd have to be away from you for several hours to have the chemo and come back. And when they weighed it up, they were like, actually, we did make the right decision to go with euthanasia, because there's no way they would have coped with that. And there's no way we could have handled that at home. So, well, there you go. And that was what they needed for closure, was to realise that actually, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And it's weighing up the pros and the cons. And yeah, like you say, people say, well, I'd have done that. So, well, you might have, but you're not me. You're not in my situation. You haven't got my finances. You haven't got my work commitments. You haven't got my family commitments. You don't know my pet the way I do. Like Dawn said, no one knows your companion as well as you do. The one walking them, feeding them, toileting them. You know pretty much every hair on their body. Every quirk. You could probably tell a change in breathing pattern, and nobody knows their companions like we do. So when we say enough is enough, please know that enough is enough, and that's all there is to it. Brilliant. Okay, so next one. This one just this is one of those that just really grinds my gears. It's only the dismissal. Another tagline I have is that loss is a loss, no matter the species. And there are a few people out there that feel that they have the right to say what is or isn't worthy of grief, and it's so unfair. It doesn't matter whether you had an ant farm, a stick insect, or you worked with elephants. If that animal in your life meant something to you, and you had a bond with them, their loss matters. Their life mattered, their loss matters. The grief you feel over the loss of that animal is valid, and always was, always will be. When people, I'm going to pass this along because it's just one of those things that just really, it saddens me, because it's just completely downplaying someone's grief. It's like, oh, it's only a rabbit, or oh, it's only a fish. And it's like, it's a sentient being that this person had a bond with, and now they're living without this companion. And so, Kirsty, do you want to?
I get it's only a rabbit all the time. And I get it. People have grown up with rabbits living in hutches in the garden and that. But my guys are house rabbits, and I am not in a position to have a dog. As it turns out, as I've grown up, I don't want one now, but I'm quite happy with my bunnies. But they'll run and greet me at the door when I come home from work, and they're the ones that jump on the bed in the morning to wake us up when the alarm goes off, and they are part of my everyday. So when somebody goes, oh, it's only a rabbit, or it's just a rabbit, is what I get quite a bit. I'm just like, yeah, but it's also part of who I am. It's part of who I've developed myself into being. I share my life with them because they bring me intense joy and happiness, and they make my house a home. So, and I think that's it. Is anything that you share that bond with, anything that changes your four walls from bricks and mortar to comfort and safety, it deserves a memory, and it deserves a place there, and it's not just a. That's yeah.
Thank you.
Well, people won't want to say to me it's only a dog or it's only a cat, because it may only be a dog or only a cat to them, but to me it was a member of my family. And fortunately, the friends that I have around me now would never dream of saying that to me, but in the past, when it's been said to me, it's only a dog, pull yourself together, it's only a dog, go and get yourself another one, type of thing. I remind them that it may only have been a dog to them, but it was a member of my family, and somebody very special. And quite often that's enough to let somebody see just how unreasonable they're being by saying that. And I always feel that people can say that because they feel awkward, generally said by people we don't know particularly well, work colleagues, acquaintances, people like that tend to be the people who say that. But yes, they don't know what to say. They may feel awkward, they may feel embarrassed, they may feel it's too personal, grief is too personal to comment on, and they may say that to try and lighten the mood somewhat. But it is probably one of the most offensive things that somebody could say to somebody who's grieving loss of a pet.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Which brings us on to, they wouldn't want you to be sad. I've heard this, I've had clients say to me that they've had friends say to them, oh, come on, cheer up, Fluffy wouldn't want you to be sad. And so this person has pushed down the feelings, they've masked the grief, they've self-medicated, whatever they needed to do because they felt that this person is right. Fluffy wouldn't, or whatever your pet's name was, wouldn't want them to be sad. They owe it to them to be the happiest they can be and live their life to the fullest. And there's plenty of time for that later on. You know, when you've moved, you know, when you've started, started to progress through your grief and processing it and coming to terms with the absence. So, Dawn, what do you think about, you know, if someone was to say, oh, you know, they wouldn't want you to be sad?
Yeah, well, this is one of these ones that's actually I find is on the balance somewhat, because not only does it, this particular saying, not only is it important as to who says it to the person that's grieving, but also what the pet owner's beliefs are. So, for example, they may have had a conversation where they are quite open to the belief that their companion animal is still around them. So if somebody said then in that case, well, I'm sure they wouldn't want you to be sad, that would then be quite reasonable and quite acceptable. And I think this is where it just this is a prime example of where with each saying, you know, if we were just to look at that and say they wouldn't want you to be sad, once again, that's almost guilt tripping somebody again, you know, to say, well, you know, come on, get yourself together, because, you know, but in actual fact, it can actually be, a lot of people use this as a coping strategy. So, for example, when they do become sort of overwhelmed or you know, they're looking for just something, any little nugget just to motivate them to get out of bed in the morning, you know, to wash their face, to go out and get some groceries, whatever it happens to be. You know, to imagine their pet beside them and witnessing that they are sad and they are brokenhearted can quite often just be enough for that person to, that little nugget of motivation to say, yeah, come on, okay, I'm going to keep working through this. I'm going to keep going. So again, it's all about who said it, the circumstances it was said in, the conversation prior to that, because obviously, you know, I think the conversation that took place prior to somebody saying that would be quite important. So for me, I would say that's probably a very sort of a 50-50 divide on that as to whether people would actually be offended by that or whether people would say, no, you're absolutely 100% right. They wouldn't, because when we are sad, the pets pick up on that, especially, well, dogs, sometimes cats do as well, but certainly my cats were very aloof. They couldn't really care less whether anybody was sad or not. But my dogs would certainly come over and sit beside me, or would pick up on anybody who was sad. so in that regard, yeah, if somebody is visualizing their pet sitting there, and yet when we're happy, our dogs are happy as well, and they respond to that. So, you know, if that is a way that somebody, you know, maybe could use that as a coping strategy, I don't see anything wrong with that for those people. But once again, it's like the layers of an onion, you know, you really need to know. Really need to be able to read the room. You need to know your client. You need to know, or you need to know your friend. You need to know that family member. You need to know that work colleague. You need to be able to know that person before you say that.
Yeah. Kirsty, have you anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would sort of along the same lines of Dawn, but the other side of it. So, you know, they wouldn't want you to be sad. Doesn't allow the bereaving pet parent to sit with the feeling of sadness. It's really important when you're dealing with really strong emotions to actually allow yourself time to sit with that emotion and feel all parts of that emotion, to then be able to start to heal through it. So somebody assuming they're saying they wouldn't want you to be sad, just it almost insinuates to that person that actually just move through it. They don't want you to be sad. Sad is not an emotion you're allowed to feel. Move on, move through. And again, it will then compress that, and it will then dwell and become bigger and bigger. You do need to be allowed to sit with that and understand why you're feeling like that, and you know, really dive deep into what's causing it and how do you move through it. It's, you know, I think Dawn's right. If it's the certain type of person and you have a certain belief system, then that can be really supportive. But on the flip side of that, it is taking away that person's ability to grieve at their own pace and in their own way.
Yeah. I like that, and I think that's a really good place to leave this slide, because that ties us in perfectly with the next, which is don't cry. So Kirsty, I'm going to ask if you'd like to carry on. Like, don't cry. You know, like you say, it's not allowing saying you wouldn't want you to be sad. It's not allowing someone to express the sadness and sit with it, and because we have to feel it to get. You know, I say to people, there's not, you can't. It's like it always brings to mind, it's like going on a bear hunt. You know, we can't go around it, we can't go over it. We've got to go through it. And it's like, yes, that's what grief is like. You have to go through it. It's going to hurt. If it isn't going to, the pain will lessen, but you have to go through it. You can't avoid it because it's always going to be there. So if someone was to say, "Oh, you know, don't cry," what, you know, how you, I don't know. There's different ways that this could be interpreted or taken. So, what's your view on this?
I think if someone stood in front of you crying, it's an emotional outburst that can make people feel quite uncomfortable, because they don't know what you're going through. They don't know why you started crying. They don't know what's triggered it. They don't know how to fix it. Personally, I'm a fixer, so I don't like it when people are beyond my realms of making them feel better. So that's something I've had to work with quite strongly to balance myself out. So by saying don't cry to somebody, I don't think people are lessly stopping them from feeling that emotion, but I also think it's them saying, I don't know how to help you and I don't know how to deal with you. Please stop doing this outburst in front of me, because it's hurting me to see you hurt. And also what you're saying, you know, when people say, oh, don't cry, crying is a relief. We use it as an emotional relief and an emotional balance system. To cry releases all sorts of, you know, different chemicals and things like that, and that is needed to get you back sometimes onto an even keel. So by crying and having that emotional outburst and working through that, it can give you a clearer state of mind post a good cry. But yeah, I think it does. Sometimes it can make the other party feel uncomfortable, and then they go, well, don't cry, because they can't fix you and they don't know how to fix you, and they don't want to see you upset.
Dawn, what's your view on this one?
Oh, tears. I think tears heal the soul. So sometimes when you think that you just can't physically cry anymore, the tears will start. And obviously depending what various triggers can bring tears on as well. That can be many months, even over a year later. Something can just trigger you and the tears can start. So, but you know, I cried in a supermarket one day. Now, of course, there's different ways, you know, people are all different in how they cry, but I had been putting my groceries through along the conveyor belt, and the person who joined behind me in the queue, they put down cat food, dog food. I didn't have to buy it that day. Because my dog had died some time before, and I just caught it out of the corner of my eye, and one by one the tears just dripped. I wasn't making any noise, I wasn't sobbing, the tears just dripped from my eyes. And I just carried on and packed my groceries, and the young lady, and she was a young lady, and she looked up at me and she's real concern and real genuineness, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, thanks." And the tears were still dripping out my eyes, and I just carried on and I just paid for my groceries and I left. So there's different types of crying as well. And sometimes the more we try to stop the tears coming, they're just building up and they're going to come out eventually. But yeah, if it, you know, we have crying, we have sobbing, we have just tears dripping out your eyes. But I don't think anybody should ever be made to feel guilty for crying. And you know, quite often when people are crying, it's best just to sit with them and not say anything at all.
Yeah. Don't interrupt the flow, sort of thing. Let it out. Yeah.
Just let them cry.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. A lot of people do feel embarrassed if they're in the company of somebody who's crying. And you can feel quite awkward. And you know, it is quite difficult. I know in the very early days when I first started in this line of work, I struggled a lot when I saw somebody crying. Now, not through embarrassment, awkwardness or anything, but only because I wanted to start crying with them. And trying to contain those tears. And a lady said to me, many years ago now, nearly 2 decades ago, she said, "Dawn, you're going to have to toughen up if you want to make it in this line of work." And I said to her, the day I toughen up is the day I hang up my hat. And I've never toughened up. And I don't think I ever will, because you cannot possibly. I think you have to be a certain type of person to be able to empathise with somebody who's and understand that pain. And I think it would take a very hard-hearted person to sit and listen to a lot of the stories that we hear every day through our line of work without shedding a tear. But then, of course, that is not taking on their emotions like a sponge. It's just basically when somebody's crying, it's quite, I feel sometimes it's quite contagious when somebody starts to cry, certainly for me anyway. But now I cope with it slightly differently.
Yeah, thank you. Right, the next one. It was God's will. Not necessarily God's will, but just this is more about religion, bringing religion into the support. Pros and cons, you know, viewpoints. I've always said, unless you know, even if you know the other person's faith and their path, then it still doesn't feel right to bring you know religion into that situation when you're trying to comfort somebody, because you know somebody could have a conflict of faith. They could, you know, it may not be as supportive as you feel it is, you know. So Kirsty, Dawn, who wants to take this one?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, just before we have to, I'll be as quick as I can because I'm aware we've got to wind up at 8:30.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think with God's will, a lot of people can feel that they've been abandoned and they're, when they're grieving by their religion. A lot of people take a lot of comfort because they do have a religion that they can fall back on. And yes, I think it's very important that anybody who is, particularly in our line of work, that we avoid any, unless we are 100% sure that the person would appreciate, mention, note of their religious beliefs. We have to make sure that beliefs, we are very aware of other people's beliefs, and that comes through with, it was God's will, which can hurt somebody enormously. The same as when things like Rainbow Bridge is mentioned. Rainbow Bridge is not. That is a belief for some people. It's a coping strategy to believe that, but it's not everybody that's going to believe in that. So we have to be exceptionally careful that we don't offer up anything like that involves any type of religion, because we do not. You've got to understand that everybody has different beliefs, and to bring. For you to bring religion into any type of discussion, certainly not to instigate it, but more often than not, it's as well even just to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, fabulous. Right, so given the time, I'm going to stop that right there. We're back to, so yeah, there's I think there was some things going on in the chat I can't see from this end, but yeah, so there were just a couple more that we were going to go through, but time, I feel this has been like a really good discussion. Thanks like to Dawn, Niall and Kirsty for your expertise, your input, and I just hope that whoever's listening to this, whoever's watching this, has learned something from it, has got something from it, and this is who we are. This is what we do. This is our passion. Supporting pet owners, supporting fellow professionals. If you're not already a member of the association, please, have a look. Please consider it, because we're a very supportive bunch for one another. Because the number of fellow pet bereavement professionals that may say, I didn't know there were others out there. We're all here together in this association, and the members, we help one another, because we're all here for the same thing. We're all passionate about pet bereavement and supporting clients at every step of their grief journey. So that being said, I think we call that an evening. Dawn, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks very much. I love it when we have these sort of informal chats, just bringing up a topic and we can all just talk away about it. Yeah, I mean, there's still, there's so many more sayings that people will, statements that people will come out with when people are grieving, that we can maybe cover on another one.
Yeah.
But if you've, I think it just makes people think a wee bit more about what they say to somebody. Just give it a wee bit of thought as to how that other person, it may sound to them, whether it's, they may take offence. And it's very funny because people, when they're grieving, we see they can take offence quite easily now. They are dealing with an awful lot of emotions, and sometimes, anger, for example, if they feel offended and they feel angry about something somebody said, that's easier to deal with than the overwhelming emotions that they're dealing with as a direct result of their loss. So it's, I always listen, don't take offence. You know, if we've all said, including myself, we've all said these things to people before. It's not the end of the world if you say them to somebody, providing it's coming from the heart. They will know it's coming from the heart. They'll know it's genuine. So don't worry if you've said something and we've just, you know, burst your bubble by saying never say that to anybody. Just be genuine, just be yourself, and that warmth and genuineness will come through in any case, with whoever you're speaking to. So don't be hard on yourself, and you know, if you say these things or you've said them in the future, but it might just give you something, you know, to think about and to look at it from a slightly different angle, and that's what we're going to achieve tonight. It's been great, Carrie. Thanks very much, and Kirsty and everybody who's
thank you.
joined us to listen in.
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you for, you know, the opportunity to host this one and talk about it. And like I said, whoever's been watching this, I really hope that you've enjoyed it. And I know it's not the nicest of topics, but it's so important, and especially from you know, whatever professional, you know, whether you're a pet bereavement counsellor, whether you're a veterinary nurse, whether you're a veterinary surgeon, a care assistant, whatever position you're in. We just hope that, you know, you've got something from it, but also, you know, we've all been ourselves tonight. This is us, you know, this is what we do. You know, we've not put on any personas or facades or anything. This is literally us. This is who we are, what we're about. So, you know, if you want to know more about the association, visit the website and, you know, have a look through there and consider joining. Have a look at our blogs and live events that we host.
Yeah, Kirsty, if you can give my next weekend, 7th, 8th of September, we'll be in North Wales at Pet Funeral Services at North Wales. And all we're asking for that is a donation to the National Military Working Dog Memorial for attending that. And that is going to be a fantastic few hours spent there if anybody still interested wants to come along and join us. That'll be a very interesting few hours at Pet Funeral Services.
Yeah, that's something like not to be missed. If you're a pet bereavement professional, no matter what capacity, if you've never visited a crematorium, honestly, do it. You know, I've been down to Dignity and I've been behind the scenes. I've seen a cremation happen, and the only way you can help a client through the cremation process and beyond is, I feel, if you actually know yourself firsthand what is involved, and then you can truly support your clients to the fullest with that. You know, any questions or anything they might. So that's something definitely to consider. So thank you all, everybody that's watched tonight. Thank you so much. Everyone that is, you know, maybe going to watch this at a later date, thank you for your time. Kirsty, Niall, Dawn, especially, thank you so much for your input. It's been brilliant hearing everybody's views and different takes on things. And I've had a few sort of aha moments and light bulb moments tonight. So so without further ado, thank you everybody for attending and for listening. Much appreciated.
Thanks everybody.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.